Hi everyone, and welcome to this session called No Speed Limits, Transport Races Ahead. And yes, all puns are intended. My name's Angela Holtzberg. I work with the Climate Champions as the road transport lead, and I will be the moderator of today's session. I think we can all agree that there is a need to decarbonize the transport industry if we want to have any chance of reaching the 1.5 ambition as laid out in the Paris Agreement. But while most parties in the transport industry, from OEMs to demand side, supply, charging infrastructure, everyone agrees on this, and yet we are not moving fast enough. Things seem to still be, there still seems to be a sense of waiting in the industry, with many waiting for others to take the first step. But today we've gathered a fantastic panel with amazing panelists that represents very different parts of the transport industry. And we're hoping with today's dialogue that we can find a way forward and to really understand more about how the roles and responsibilities in the transport industry are developing and changing and what we need to do to move forward. So today we will hear from Mrs. Pia Heidenmark-Cook, the CSO of IKEA Retail, Inca Group. We have Mr. Christian Levin, the CEO of Scania. We have Mrs. Rana Abib, Executive Director at REN21. And we also have Mr. Renato Franklin, CEO at Movida. But before we dive into our fantastic panel, I would like to introduce you all to a dear friend and close collaborator to the Climate Champions, and that is Mr. Jamie Plotnick from the Climate Group. Now, the Climate Group and the Climate Champions have recently launched a platform called Route Zero, where we work together to really bring together all the campaigns, the initiatives, the stakeholders in the industry, if you will, to accelerate speed and to share ambition and good and positive stories to decarbonize the transport industry. And I don't want to go on and on about it too much, but if you feel an urge after listening to the panel today, and I hope you do, if you feel an urge to take action, then please do visit routezero.org and just click the Take Action button and see what you can do to bring change into the transport industry. And that's all the plugging I will do for that. But Jamie, the Climate Group has been working for a long time on decarbonizing the transport industry and working for that. So I'd like to hear from you, what are some of the trends you see driving the shift in fleets at the moment?
Thanks, Angela. Well, it's going to be a really big decade for zero emissions vehicles. I think people are very bad at predicting exponential, highly disruptive change, and I think that's exactly what we're going to be seeing. There's already, in terms of total cost of ownership across a range of models in many markets, an advantage to electric vehicles. We're seeing right now huge amounts of capital and investment going into EV and battery manufacturing, perhaps slightly less into infrastructure, but I think that's going to be picking up very quickly. Model choice for passenger vehicles is going to double between 2019 and 2022. We're probably going to see widely available retrofits of internal combustion engines into EVs by 2023, 2024. Sticker price parity could be there as soon as 2024 in some vehicle categories. Major cities like Beijing, London, Rome are introducing low or zero emissions areas, and there are phase-out targets, both nationally and sub-nationally, from places like the UK, the Netherlands, California, Quebec. So there's an awful lot of change coming.
Right. So I know the Climate Group has recently done some research on fleets. Why fleets specifically, and what did you find?
Yeah, so this is the UN Global Compact Summit. There's a lot of businesses here, and those businesses have fleets. And fleets are around a quarter of the vehicles on the road, but they're well over half the emissions from road transport. Very simply, this is because fleets tend to be heavier vehicles and they travel more kilometers. And even if you strip out the medium and heavy vehicles, actually light duty fleets are the most significant element within this. And that's why at the Climate Group, we've decided to launch the EV100 initiative a few years ago with members including Inca Group. And what we're seeing there is now over 100 corporate members committed to transitioning 5 million vehicles in their fleets to EVs by 2030. But we wanted to understand what was going to happen with, there are 500 million vehicles in fleets globally, and we wanted to understand what an accelerated scenario for reducing those, for transitioning those vehicles to EVs was going to be. And what we found is it's really meaningful. It's double-digit percentage drops in road transport emissions, even against quite a bullish business as usual scenario from Bloomberg. It brings forward a number of outcomes. It will bring forward when EVs become dominant in market share, when there's sticker price parity between EVs and internal combustion engine vehicles. It's going to help reduce battery costs. It's going to increase by millions the numbers of charging points that are going to be built out. And very importantly, it's going to substantially increase vehicle availability in the second-hand market, which is key for getting affordable EVs to consumers. And it's going to increase the amount of battery storage on the grid when we get vehicle-to-grid technology, which is going to help introduce the flexibility that we need in the energy system as we introduce more renewable energy. And we've tested this against the hard laws of physics. There is going to be, or there can be, enough lithium carbonate out there that it can be done with the currently announced production capacity increases in lithium cell manufacturing. So please do keep an eye out for the research when it comes out in the next week or two.
Looking forward to reading it. I'm sure there's many interesting findings in there. You mentioned that there is a lot of businesses here today, and there absolutely is. But if there's one thing I think we all know, is that it can't be only businesses, right? We need governments too to get on board. So from your point of view, what do we need to see from governments in terms of action?
Yeah, so there's different levels of government and there's different levels of action to be taken by those levels of government. At the subnational level, cities, states, regions, zero emission areas we've seen have been really key in driving things forward and in helping to change the economics and the calculations for businesses. Zero emission areas, there's a really good guide that's just come out from the World Economic Forum and McKinsey, so I highly recommend any subnational governments take a look at that with best practice guidance on implementation. Phase out dates, of course, from both vehicle manufacturers and from governments really do shift set perspectives and perceptions and how capital's moving across markets. And public procurement is particularly key, especially for buses, where we think that that's the first category that will completely switch to zero emission vehicles, ideally ahead of 2030. And then we've got to improve the business case, so purchase incentives until we get to sticker price parity, including for second-hand vehicles, or providing incentives for retrofit, looking at corporate tax codes to see how these impact fleets, getting gigafactories built, of course, and building out the energy and charging infrastructure that's going to be needed, especially along major transport corridors, and really making sure that that investment is preemptive of demand, because if it's not preemptive of demand, it's going to be a constraint on growth.
Your lips to the government's ears. Thank you so much, Jamie. Thank you for joining us, and thanks for your insights.
Thanks.
So with that, I'd like to, dive straight into our panel, and I'm turning to you first, Pia. When people think of transport, I don't think IKEA Retail is necessarily the first company they think of. So can you tell us a bit, what role does a home furnishing company play in the transport industry? And what's your point of view on the speed of transition at the moment?
Thank you, Angela. I think IKEA Retail and retail in general has quite a lot to do with transport, because we have a lot of products that we want to reach our customers. And Jamie was talking about exponential growth, and if we look at the amount of e-commerce and the amount of home deliveries we have today compared to only 5 years ago, it is truly exponential change. So we need to be in this space because we want to deliver to our customers and meet our customer needs. And then on the other point you mentioned, Angela, in terms of the change we're in, I think we are in change now. It's not about planning for the future and looking into what's going to happen in a few months or in a few years. It's happening right now. So for us, we are very much in deployment and scale mode. We have been doing this for a few years now. We have already 90% of our home deliveries in China, being with electric. We have quite a few cities like Shanghai, Amsterdam, that is 100% zero emission home deliveries. And we are deploying solutions in 16 of the 30 markets where we are operating. So we're very much in the doing, but also being, I wouldn't say we're the first, but being among the first to get into this at scale. We've also encountered every problem there is, because we are kind of solving as we go. So we see that we need to invest in infrastructure ourselves across our store network. We are in dialogue with OEMs to develop the right light truck we need. So there's a lot of things we're kind of hitting, but really solving. So it's a lot of problem solving mode. And then just the last reflection is also this around the hen and the egg, what comes first. And I just wonder what it is with us in industry, government, and all the players. Because if you take, I'm not going to mention the name, but if you take some of these fantastic products that we all have in our hands, that we stay connected with all the time, I don't think there was anyone sitting waiting. It was more, how can we get in to create the need for this social media product? And I'm just wondering a little bit, why are we not getting into that same mentality when it comes to quite a lot of the sustainability challenges? We're sitting in this waiting for others to act instead of saying, there's a market here. We can actually do something that's really good for the planet, for people, and for our business. So let's be the first mover.
That's great. And I hear you say we a lot. And you mentioned briefly that you now work with OEMs and with others to push through these barriers you're encountering. But so when you say we, is that IKEA or is that a network of partners? What type of collaboration do you see that you need to make this happen?
Yeah, no, it is definitely a we, Angela. I think across, first of all, in general, just like James was sharing, it is governments are needed, suppliers of solutions are needed, retailers are needed, every player. So for us, I mean, we're chartering into unknown territory. We've had to learn a lot. If I look at our procurement teams, instead of just kind of buying transport services, we are now co-developing how we want these transport services to look like. We are doing much more world around us analysis, understanding which cities are moving at what pace, because of course we want to deliver to customers in both city centers, but also in suburbs. And if there's clear signals that diesel is not the wished and preferred transport mode, then what does that mean for us? So we need to shift. We are working together with OEMs to develop light trucks. We are not buying them, we are not the fleet owner, but we are making them available for our service providers so they can tap into it. We're looking into financing models to support, because we know that it is a big investment still in many markets where we are, and these are often small suppliers, so they don't have the kind of cash-rich funds to step into this space. We know that we are in the hen and the egg with chargers and then the cars. So we're also looking into charging infrastructure. So I would say the we is very much a network and ecosystem of those both up and down the supply chain for us, but also inside the company. We have real estate, we have the fulfillment teams, we're looking at upskilling our people. So I would say every function is really involved in this. So, and then also investing in new solutions. There's a lot of disruptive companies in this space, and we can partner and we can also invest to help them grow so that we get the momentum we need, because we need to get out of this hen and the egg situation as soon as possible.
Perfect. So final question, and just a short answer. When will we then see 100% zero emission deliveries from IKEA?
Thank you, Angela, for reminding me. I missed to say that. So we have set a goal to have 100% zero emission home deliveries by 2025. So we are betting on that this will go fast.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Pia, and thank you for your insights. Christian, turning to you. Now, we heard Pia talk about the role of IKEA as a purchaser of these services, but also doing, obviously, a lot of other things as well. Now, you represent Scania, a more traditional player in the transport industry, maybe a manufacturer, a big brand, trusted brand in the space. So what is the role of Scania now? Is it the same as it has always been, or is your role changing as well?
Yeah, thanks, Angela. And by the way, thanks also for helping us out being part of our Sustainable Transport Forum last week.
My pleasure.
So at Scania, our purpose is to drive the shift towards sustainable transport systems. And with that comes commitment to reduce emissions in line with science. And we push a lot on that, and hence being in line with the Paris Agreement. So as a proof of that, we are the first and still only company in our industry to set science-based targets. And we will see deep cuts of carbon emissions already by 2025. And actually, I'm confident that by 2030, we will be at zero when it comes to our own direct emissions. And then half of our volume may well have an electric driveline by that time. And looking even further ahead, we have committed to only put fossil-free vehicles on the road by 2040. To a question who our customers are and what their needs will be, I think that is going to change. As the landscape shifts, our business model will also have to shift and evolve with it. Electrification and other emerging transport technologies, such as connectivity and autonomous, will create new drivers for profitability. And to succeed in this environment, we need to embrace the technology and fully explore and develop the new business opportunities that they offer. And of course, at the same time, continuing to excel in what is today our core business. Our customers expect us to deliver them with complete solution, and we must be able to do that. And the most obvious example, and Pia was into it, is of course that with battery electric vehicles comes the need for charging and information around charging solutions. But we also need to be better react to changing conditions, and we need to be much faster to market. And we will work even closer with our customers to deploy new solutions by bringing them closer to our development process.
Fantastic. So you mentioned, there's so much here I'd like to dig into, but you did mention one thing that I think is so fantastic, and it is that you actually have science-based targets and you want to commitments in line with science. I love that. So what was the rationale for Scania? How come you are the only one? What was the line of thought behind thinking, yes, we will do this?
And I think it's pretty simple. I mean, we started out in 2015 discussing as every year our strategy, and by then we came to the conclusion that we really needed to review our purpose. I mean, why do we exist as a corporation? And that's where we stated that our purpose is to drive the shift towards sustainable transport system, and that means taking a lead, and that means changing for real. And then to have some kind of proof point that we're doing the right thing, we say, okay, that must be then to act in coordination with science. And that's why it was natural for us to connect them to the Potsdam Institute, to have them help us really to say, okay, what does it mean for us in our operations, but also in our customers' operation? And then we concluded after a lot of work that we think we can do it. So we go for it. And then, as I would say, as cream on the pie, we have also been able now to convince our fellow colleagues, the other European OEMs in producing heavy commercial vehicles, that they're also, maybe still not committing fully, but at least they commit to say a common target is by 2040 to stop putting combustion engine vehicles on the roads. And that is, of course, the only chance if we, by 2050, thinking that the technical life length of a heavy commercial vehicle is on average 10 years. So there we got them with us. But we're going to continue to pull and be the good example in our industry to really show that this is not only necessary for the climate and for our planet, but it's also the only way to be profitable in our industry.
I like that. And at the end of the day, that's also a big goal for businesses, of course, to be profitable.
Has to be, yeah.
Exactly. I just, one just quick last question. So you said the landscape is shifting and we need to change with it. So what do you see, what's the main trend sort of that you see now that will have a huge impact, not only on Scania, but on all the heavy duty manufacturers?
Well, I think super short term, it's really, if we're going to halve our emissions by 2030, I mean, there is no one silver bullet, but right now it's really about getting the fuels right so that we get a higher proportion of biofuels or synthetic fuel into the existing rolling fleets. And at the same time, it's then going all in for electric vehicles and getting them onto the road, not to get into this hen and the egg dilemma that Pia was into. So we're moving full steam ahead, and I know that we have some pretty tough competitors that are doing the same thing. And then, of course, it's then our responsibility to partner up with suppliers of energy to make sure that the electricity that our customers are going to charge is actually green. Otherwise, all these efforts didn't really make any sense. But it's biofuels short term, it's electrification, and then of course going further ahead, there might also be hydrogen vehicles for some application in the heavy side that would make sense. But there's less certainty, I would say, on that side.
Okay. Great, thank you so much. And I already now two panelists in, we can see that a home furnishing retailer is working directly with OEMs and transporters, and the manufacturer is working with academia and with utility. So I think already now we're seeing that, yes, there are a lot of new, more or less new actors in the industry. Which brings me to Renato. Now you represent Movida, a leasing company in Brazil. And I think this is also one of the roles we see more and more coming into focus, right? With fleets are expensive, yeah? Everyone knows that. And we're seeing now how the leasing companies are enabling this transition in some cases. And we see companies like IKEA actually investing in leasing platform as a way to finance this transition. But going directly to the source, what role do you think that leasing companies can play in enabling the transition to more sustainable fleets? And what role do you think you will be playing in the coming years?
Oh, very good. I'm very excited to participate here and hearing my colleagues speaking here from an important representative of our customers, and Christian from Scania. It's a large partner here. Movida is part of a group that is the largest transportation group in Brazil and Latin America, Simpar in GSL. And we believe that our role is gaining even more importance. First of all, of course, we have long-term commitments. We are aligned with UN goals. We work with science-based targets for all companies in our group. And we believe that we need to address or to do our best in all scopes. That's why we consider scope 3 and not only scope 1 and 2. Because, for example, for Movida, 98% of our emissions came from scope 3. Then we work to find solutions that allow my customers to eliminate or reduce or mitigate their emissions, or at least compensate all of their emissions. That's what we have this goal to be carbon neutral in 2030. But of course, more important than that, it's to reduce our emissions and to facilitate the growth of hybrid and electric cars and renewable fuel. Our role, for me, one important role is to demystify electric cars, because people are concerned about that. When we start renting cars on retail, electric cars on retail, people ask simple questions like, oh, but I will need to charge, I will need to stop to charge the vehicle. Oh, this car is strong enough to go to this acclive or something like that. And the usage, it's much more exciting than they expect. And the friction is much less than they expect. It's no friction, because you recharge your car when you are at work or when you are sleeping at home. Then it's very easy. And different solutions help us why we do not have a good infrastructure. Like today, we can rent another charge, extra charges, fast charges for their homes, their offices, and their country houses, for example. Then this is an important role that we have here. Another important role is to claim for everyone that we can do much more than what we and population expect from ourselves. Then when we talk about compensation, for example, we work here and we use it to have compensation programs, planting trees just to compensate our emissions, but it was just that. Now we find a project that has a different proposal, generate jobs for low classes in small cities, 112 small cities, linking the Pantanal with Amazonia, two major important natural reserves of Brazil, with the largest biodiversity corridor in the world, the Araguaias corridor, to not only compensate, but create a different positive impact for all these cities. And giving these examples allows us to gain visibility and to invite more companies from different industries to do more things together. Today, the most important things that we achieved are the alliances that allow us to make major impacts, major positive impacts than we could do alone. Then doing together, I believe that we can change this world in this action, and that's the decade for action.
Couldn't agree more, and thank you again. So much in here too I'd like to jump into. Unfortunately, we don't have as much time as I'd like, but I love the point around demystifying electric cars and working with the many people and enabling them to be more sustainable in their lives, but also to exceed expectation and working with other businesses and getting into things like biodiversity and jobs. But from your perspective then, working both towards businesses and in alliances, but also working towards the many people, if you had to make an educated guess, who do you think will move faster first? Will it be the many people demanding zero emission transportation, or will it be the businesses in the driver's seat of zero emission transportation?
First, thank you for the question, because it's very important. I believe that companies has a major job here, because of course, to convince lots of people on retail, we would need lots of money to invest on marketing and to give knowledge and awareness for all these people. But when we do an agreement with a big company that has 30,000 employees, for example, and with 100% compensated fleet or electric cars over there, there are 30,000 people sharing with their families the knowledge that they get with the companies and these things. Then they strength to share this knowledge and to share this ambition and this need to act now and to change now. I believe it's much stronger through companies, through business, through big alliances. Of course, we work on retail, we use the Conscious Capitalist Institute to put knowledge in people's head, but I prefer to work with companies to share more and spread faster this need to change now.
Yeah. And it's like Jamie said, if we can change the fleets, then we've come a long way, right? And like you say, if we change the fleets, we also change the mind of the many people and their friends and families. I think that's a fantastic sentiment. Thank you. Rana, jumping to you. So we've heard, our panelists talk a lot about the changing roles. We also heard Christian saying that if we do all this and we're changing all the vehicles, but we don't have the charging infrastructure with the right type of energy to go with it, that will only get us so far. So some of our efforts will be, if not in vain, then it's not as good as it could be. And to be fair, a few years ago, you might not have been in a panel about sustainable transport, right? But with electrification seeming more or less inevitable by now, I think nobody can really deny the important connection between transport and renewable energy. So from your point of view, what's the key message that the transport industry needs to consider in the coming years?
I think the key message is probably the first one, which is, I think what Christian had mentioned, is unfortunately still not a common awareness or focus. There are still many blind spots, and it's quite interesting that it's more in the electrification area that the transport sector and transport player understand that they also need to look at the energy supply. The reality is that there is no way to decarbonize the transport sector without also addressing, even after demand reduction, etc., where the energy comes from. And from the energy side, actually, we are not able to decarbonize the energy sector without addressing the transport sector, which is consuming 32% of the total energy. And I think this is really something which is fundamental. One key message is that the transport sector is lagging very, very far behind, also behind other sectors. Only 3.3% of the energy consumed in the transport sector comes from renewable energy. Most of this is biofuel. Only a very small part, so 0.3%, comes from renewable electricity. And I think that's really, I think one part which is, there is an ambition, there is a raising, increasing awareness, but the reality we see on the ground is very often far from where we need to be. I think the message with regard to this is really that the transport sector needs to engage much more into the development of renewable energy and into the use of renewable energy. And with regard to this, I think that renewable electricity and the electrification is a real game changer, because renewable electricity allows also energy consumers like transport players to not only become consumers, but also producers of their own electricity. And this is really a driving force, because many transport players are very much attracted by the energy security on that side, by the low energy cost. And when we're looking at many fleet operators, human resource, for instance, and the energy cost is the biggest cost area. So there's really interesting entry points. The reality is, unfortunately, I think still that many governments do not link the two sectors, and we still operate very much in silos. So, for instance, only 10% of the NDCs include measures on renewable-based transport to reach the global climate targets by 2030 and 2050. We see that there's only 3 countries linking e-mobility and renewable electricity: Germany, Austria, and since last year, Japan. So there is a lot of potential for much, much stronger integration. And if the question with regard to this is how do we move this, I think it's unfortunately still some of the frameworks and the performance indicators that need to be adapted. In transport, we have the avoid, shift, improve, and it sounds like renewable comes at the end. Many energy players will say like, oh, the transport players should look where they get their renewable energy from. And we kind of have a chicken and egg problem here too. So who's moving first and having a finger pointing? I think many new players come into this space, and clearly cities play a big role here. Also utilities, oil and gas players, the distribution, electric distribution operators, but also districts and citizens. So here we clearly see that this autonomy plays a big role.
Thank you for all your insights, your comments. It's clear to me you all overlap. I think I'd like to be in a room to discuss this from every angle, like what's IKEA doing with renewable energy, what's Scania doing with charging infrastructure. There's so many bits and pieces here to connect together. And I hope that's a discussion and dialogue that companies will have in the coming years, and are of course having already. So I'd like to leave you all with one final question, and it's quite common in these panels that the final question is something along the lines of, what is your ask of? What's your ask of policy? What's your ask of governments, etc.? But today I'd like to flip the table just a little bit. So instead of asking what your ask is, I'd like to ask you, okay, it's clear we need to make a shift, we need to move faster. So in 2 sentences, just a few seconds, what will your organization do, and what are you bringing to the table when it comes to decarbonizing transport? And Pia, I will start with you.
Thank you, Angela, for letting me start. I think a sense of urgency will bring to the table the experience we have with what we have achieved already. So electrification is here, solutions are here, so we can do it. We are investing a lot in renewable energy and has been, or renewable energy slash electricity, and has been since 2009. So we can bring that experience and learning to the table as well. And then hopefully a proven track record of a collaborative mindset. So because we need to do this together. So that's what we bring to the table.
Perfect, thank you. Moving on to you, Christian, what will Scania bring to the table?
Right. First of all, we will bring our 52,000 people, our employees, all committed to help our customers to be winners in this fossil-free transport system. And of course, we will bring deep technological understanding of the current and future technologies and what the transport companies need to be able in order to operate them. To scale sustainable transport solutions and to reach the climate targets, real partnership, I mean, this has been said over and over again, in the industry, across industries, and with policymakers are needed, and we are driving there. We are setting up also strategic partnerships in our own supply chain with partners that can supply us with renewable electricity, green batteries, or fossil-free steel. So I'm convinced that the way to speed up the shift and to get the work done is by working with like-minded partners and show that what seems impossible is actually not only possible, but also highly profitable.
Fantastic, I love that, highly profitable. Renato, moving to you, what will you bring to the table?
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I believe that the main point that we are here right now and discussing now these problems and they need to change, it's that everyone, as you mentioned, puts the responsibility in others, governments, ONGs, big corporations. And what I want to bring to the table, it's we want to be an example of everyone should do its best right now to compensate and give examples that everything is possible. Transportation industry, it's a challenge for climate change and everything, but we can do much more than we are planning to do. Then we need to do a lot in a few years. It's a learning journey, but we will work hard, and this decade will be a change. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. And final word to you then, Rana. What will REN21 bring to the table?
So what we bring to the table is a community of renewable energy players, but basically renewable energy players means like not only from the renewable tech side, but all players in ecosystem that are key to drive the energy transition. And this means like bridging, and what we bring here is, I think, a culture of evidence-based data to really inform decision makers, crowdsourced data, but also a listening and a bridging component to make this data and the parameters relevant to the different decision makers and their agenda. And clearly, I think as much as we support the science part and are very much standing for this, we see that narratives and the right business models and understanding what the key performance indicators of players are is fundamental to drive change. And for this, we are now also really doing specifically influence mapping on Nexus topics too, to see which players basically to connect. I think the like-minded pioneers, but also the players who can push from different angles, because it's about systemic change.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us today. I think it's very clear just from this short discussion how many overlaps there are, how much complexity there is, but also that there really is a collaborative spirit between very different players in the industry. So thank you all so much for joining us today, and best of luck in your efforts to decarbonize the transport industry. Thank you.